That's right, we've got a whole nother round of stands ready to kill the honored one, and that means you get another video of us jamokes acting like we know what we're talking about. Hit that like button and go watch all the previous parts if you haven't already. So let's just go ahead and spin this.
Yes, go, yippee. Okay, Will, give me something interesting to talk about that's not just gonna be a wash. Oh, yes.
Already?
Yes.
Oh, ooh.
Hey, man.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on. Remember chat or YouTube comment section. I don't know everything by heart because that's a lot of info. Hanged Man. So a really fast stand, goes for the jugular. It's a part 3 stand, so it's really basic.
Hangman is a stand that attacks a person through their reflection, and it's honestly pretty debatable if Limitless would get bypassed through attacking Gojo this way, but Gojo could just easily demolish all the reflective objects in the area. I think the biggest thing for Hanged Man would be, is he actually light when he's moving between reflections? Because I guess the only argument that I could actually see for Hanged Man potentially affecting Gojo and getting through Limitless would be if he actually does turn into light. In Stardust Crusaders, he actually goes right directly into Polnareff's eye. So is that if he's pure light and goes right through Limitless because it's smaller than subatomic, we know that that's able to go through Limitless. I mean, if light can't go through Limitless, Gojo would literally just be blind. He wouldn't be able to see at all. So we already know light goes through Limitless.
It would be crazy just keeping the fucking bandana on and he would be able to win.
Oh my god, that's so true. The blindfold is the win con here.
Just don't let your eyes be seen. Yeah, like he'd be able to, because light. Plus the stand isn't really like, it's not that strong in retro. Like Polnareff is able to like easily cut up him and his stand user Jay Guile. So it's just like I don't think this is like a really like crazy stand other than its speed and ability, which Gojo should be able to counter pretty I wouldn't say effortlessly, but easily. It's just Hangman. He just gives us light speed feats in Jojo. Other than that, he's like not really that interesting, at least in my opinion.
To be fair, I immediately gave up on Hangman the moment we realized that the blindfold was all Gojo needed to be completely invulnerable in this fight.
Or like in any environment where there's like not another person or anything, it's just like a fucking like hallway or something, and it's just like you really can't do anything here, Jay Guile. You're cooked.
Literally, the only kind of damage I think Hangman would be able to do to Gojo would easily just be ignored by like reverse curse technique. Like he would just be able to heal it easily. I mean, I guess sure, if he's not wearing the blindfold and he gets inside of Gojo's eye and like cuts him directly inside of his head, like literally as he's in between transition of objects, you could make the argument. But again, we've seen Gojo repair his brain before and other characters, so it's he's extremely durable, and his regeneration just is to boot too. So it's just like to the point even a sneak attack in his reflection wouldn't one-shot him or do anything. So unfortunately, stand that can get through Limitless but can't kill Gojo. Let's see, let's roll it one more time.
Give me something that's not a fighting based one. Civil War. Right?
This is going to be an all you one, baby.
So how Civil War works is how the ability procs is making, if you feel guilty towards anything, more or less, if Gojo feels guilty about anything, and definitely knowing his character, he is probably guilty for a lot, kind of like this veil. It's more like a membrane. I think that's what they describe it in the manga. This membrane kind of foams over you, and you kind of constantly repeat like this guiltiness that you've done to another person or to yourself. It just kind of suffocates you, like, because that's how guilt is. It's just like a kind of guilt it's like a fully realized feeling of how guilt physically feels. Like it's not like emotional, it's more physical in this sense. So depending if a Civil War can proc, this should be able to hurt Gojo, because it's more on Gojo himself than the stand here in this case. So
Gojo's definitely got some skeletons in the closet for sure. Sure. I mean, that is literally canonically how he gets sealed in Shibuya Incident, because the main villain literally took over his best friend's corpse that he had to kill. There's probably other forms of guilt guilt that of just being a jujutsu sorcerer entails, but even just taking advantage of the entire hidden inventory, Riko Amanai, the star plasma vessel, getting shot by Toji, killing his adopted son's dad and never telling him about it. There's so many different things that this could take advantage of. And like you said, they're kind of like almost like ghosts, or like they're like metaphysical beings, right? Like they should be able to just, they're not really going to be pushed back by Limitless or the infinite space that's appearing. They're just gonna walk through Gojo.
It's like a weird, like, physical / non-physical thing. And I'll add two things here. Even if Gojo does kill Axl Row, Gojo's not gonna feel guilty for killing Axl Row like Johnny did. It's just not in Gojo's character. So like the rebirth from guilt, like ability that Axl Row has, because it's like, I died, you feel guilty, I've now come back to life thanks to my stand, wouldn't work here. This ability could work, like the whole like guilt membrane could crush him and suffocate him.
After Riko dies, he literally looks at Geto and he's like, yeah, do you want to just kill all these people? I probably just wouldn't care at all if that happened. He wants to save humans, but like he knows what needs to be done and he's willing to do what needs to be done.
It could be potentially effective, but for the most part, I would say Gojo probably clears here. And if anything, this is an interesting way of how this stand ability would work in like a domain expansion. Even if he's killed, like the ability can still be there. So it'd be weird. Like I think this one's very scenario dependent and probably requires a lot more thought, at least in specific with Civil War here. So I give it to Gojo, but like with the like the added caveat of potentially could kill if the circumstances were correct.
Toughest part is like the membrane that ends up getting, you know, created as the ghost, and all the guilt and everything continues to pile on and everything like that. It's unclear if it would even be able to actually kill Gojo, because I think Hot Pants still survived even after going through everything. So it's with reverse curse technique, like you said, if Gojo probably wouldn't feel guilty for killing Axl Row. And even if that was the case, if let's say Gojo killed him and he was like, oh, you know what, actually that guy was pretty cool, I feel bad about that, and he comes back and he's like, oh, I still need to make sure this guy's dead, then domain expansion, he can just turn him into a vegetable.
It would be interesting for the most part. I would like to see how that fight would kind of play out, but maybe in my head I'm hyping up it a little bit too much.
I think we'd be at the number 10 count for Hollow Purple.
Hollow Purple, biatch.
Give the people what they want. And what I think the people would want most is today's sponsor, HelloFresh. So if you've been around the stream or the channel for a long time, you know I am a super picky eater, and my girlfriend struggles every week trying to find meals for us to eat together. So way before we even got this sponsor, something that we used time and time again was HelloFresh. HelloFresh gives us the option to choose from over 30 different calorie and protein smart recipes every week. It all comes packed with fresh ingredients, pre-portioned for easy cooking, and you can customize your delivery every week to mix and match the different lifestyle options you might be going through at different times. Or if you just want to try something new, especially for breakfast. The most important meal of the day, by the way, that HelloFresh is now including free. Every week we get a free breakfast item with our delivery, included as a free lifetime benefit just for being a subscriber. Click the link in the description, scan the QR code, or use my code and get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life, with one breakfast item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, local discount will apply. If you've been looking for a change, don't miss out on this opportunity. Subscribe to HelloFresh now, and thank you for sponsoring the video. Let's spin this shit. What's next?
Come on, give me something cool.
We got soft and wet. TikTok's favorite fucking matchup, apparently. I gotta probably end up doing this video. Is this canon? Is that true? Yeah, I see a lot of people liking this fight. So I guess to really cut to it, because I know what people are gonna want is just go beyond. There's a lot of interpretations on how this stand works in the end game. Go Beyond has the ability to shoot out bubbles that spin so fast that they stop existing in our reality, meaning that in theory, technically within JoJo's, this thing can technically hit anybody guaranteed. It depends on how you look at it. It could either partially affect concepts themselves, like equivalent to like an Act 3 or Act 2 bullet from Johnny. So it's like it's able to do like a massive amount of damage to the physical body. There's a lot of leeway here. On top of that, Soft and Wet has Plunder, which is his ability to like steal things, quotation marks, away from people. It's very abstract. Josuke can steal like the water from a person's body, the eyesight, the friction from it.
it's kind of weird. There's never been like a limitation given to it, so like in theory, like potentially, I'm not going to say it could happen, but like soft and wet could steal, if we're just using a random person, like their blood or their heartbeat or etc, etc. There's a lot of ways that Gappy could theoretically one-shot a person. Now, would they affect Gojo? In the case of Plunder, probably not, but the Go Beyond bubble, since it's like moving infinitely and it bypasses anything, like infinity itself wouldn't matter here, because it just wouldn't care about infinity, so it would land. So now it's just become this like battle of just like whose abilities are better. I think this is like a similar case with our last video, where it's like this fight needs a whole like video in and of itself. I can't summarize this in like 5 minutes. Infinity wouldn't work here on Gappy. It just wouldn't.
Not against Go Beyond, not at all, because literally the fact that the bubbles become non-existent is the truest sense of the word, and I don't even think it alerts Wonder of You's calamity. I'm pretty sure, because it's not. So if we're to go based off of the fact that Limitless, even of itself, it has the whole subatomic particles condition, you know, sometimes poisons can get through. Obviously light is able to get through, and the reason why that is because Gojo's Limitless works automatically in a sense of it detects not violence per se, but it basically detects threats or things that are able to hurt him, and that's basically how it deciphers that. So if one, they're already non-existent, so that takes away the physical property of the bubble getting, you know, pushed away by the infinite space. It also completely removes the idea that Gojo's Limitless would even interpret the bubble, even if that non-existent thing wasn't a clause, because it's not going to determine that as a threat. So I think they would get through. Like you said, Metas, I think the big thing is they just overall probably wouldn't cause too much damage in like one shot. Like it would probably take a couple of the bubbles if they are like building level. Obviously,
remember there are some people that think so. This is where we get into the weird arguments. I did a video with other JoJo YouTubers, and it is kind of contentious on how you view it. But like that last shot that he uses to like kill Wonder View, and it's like its true form state. Some people view that as like basically like a law of the universe. So like the AP scaling here goes from like you can hurt a wall to just like, oh, you're probably fucking dead. It's going to do like a massive amount of damage. So I'd say it just depends. On the lower end, it would be pretty interesting. On the higher end, it gets very wild. Even then, in terms of scaling too, the scaling you use for Wonder View also affects Go Beyond, because of course Wonder View has like the Iraqi statements in the back of his like pocket. Like we haven't used them yet, we haven't seen them yet. We'll probably end up seeing them in this video, but like Wonder View when we get to them is just like insanely powerful. So if you just do like A/B scaling, you just have to assume like Wonder View just at the end game of JoJoing is ridiculously powerful as well. They would heavily damage each other for the most part. Like Infinity is not in play here, so it's actually like more of an interesting discussion than usual.
I guess because there's that large gap of attack potency, the durability, I imagine as well, between building and who the hell knows. I guess it's kind of hard to say whether red, blue, hollow purple would like actually, you know, is it one shot? What Soft and Wet's done? Is it going to take multiple times to kill Soft and Wet and their user or Gappy? Also, you have to imagine, you know, I imagine domain expansion in most situations for Gojo is probably an instant win con, but is he going to be able to accomplish that? And I guess my question before we settle on the result would be that whole plunder ability. That is something that could potentially be a large threat to Gojo if it's able to get through Limitless. Is that ability able to be used with the Go Beyond bubbles, or no? It actually, the bubbles have to be physically, they have to make physical contact.
So Gappy has like 3 bubbles. He has like explosive bubbles that he borrows from Killer Queen, spoilers by the way, and then he just has like the bubbles that just plunder, and then the Go Beyond bubbles. So it just it depends on how you see how the bubbles interact, because it's like they do have to travel distance. So for the most part, the explosion bubbles and the plunder bubbles aren't probably going to do anything to Infinity itself, unless plunder could take away, like, it could probably just take away your fucking brain, to be honest. So like if
can it take away physical properties in and of itself? Like, can it just take Limitless away?
I don't. If Limitless was turned off, yes, but if it's already on the get-go, no. It's very conditional, at least in my opinion. I think overall what you technically could say, and for the most part it's going to end up being the win condition, at least in terms of this fight, domain expansion. Domain expansion is going to be a big one here for the most part. Gojo probably wins, but that probably is like at 51%. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Yeah, let's move on. We've been spending so much time on Soft and Wet.
I knew we were. That's why I put him. That's why I said put him in the list. Oh, we're gonna get Enigma. Okay, we were talking about this before we started recording. So Enigma, basically very similar to Civil War. If he catches like a pattern you do when you're like nervous or scared or afraid, it needs to see it once, and then by the second time it will proc, and once it procs, it will allow Enigma's user, I'm not gonna say his name, it's like completely Japanese, I'm gonna ruin it, can place you in kind of like a paper world, quote unquote. Now, in theory, yes, this should be able to proc on Gojo just like how Civil War did. However, problem is, I don't think that would ever happen. Going based off of personalities, this isn't gonna affect Gojo at all, at least in my opinion. Enigma's cool, but like at least in this versus, it just wouldn't end up mattering in the long run. You're scared or you're afraid, and then you're giving off like a subconscious motion that you are, which I don't think would ever happen with Gojo. He would literally just be standing still the entire time, just not scared at all.
Let alone that it happens twice, so you can recreate the tell for the ability to take effect. My question would be, is if, let's say for example, if it's not even in a one-on-one fight situation, let's give Enigma the greatest benefit of the doubt here. Let's say they're just stalking Gojo. Is it like, now what kind of like level of fear or nervousness does it have to be? Does it have to be all out like, holy shit, I'm terrified? Or can it be like, you know what I mean, Gojo's walking down the street and he almost steps on something and he goes, oh, you know?
I think it would probably, because it has to be subtle. So it's like, if you're just in a fight, just a regular fight, and your opponent does something that you're nervous about, like, oh, he took a slightly different step than usual, and then you all of a sudden like twitch your thumb because you're like, oh, that's just your subconscious like nervousness kicking in. Like, for whatever reason, if Gojo was scared in this instance, which I would doubt, and he just like starts doing this like weird twitch with the shoulder, and he does it once, and then Enigma notices it a second time, for whatever reason, if he did that, the ability would then proc, and then he would lose.
You've got Gojo going up against Sukuna, probably the best match he'll ever have in his entire life, and the thought of losing crosses his mind, and a smile comes across his face. He's like, damn, haven't felt this way in a while. This is pretty cool. Like, it's so like, even up against Soft and Wet, like, and he's like about to die, even that is kind of like questionable. Will Gojo actually show nervousness?
I don't think it would proc. Nah. I really don't.
They can get through Limitless. They can't kill Gojo though, unfortunately. Let's spin.
Let's see. Come on, give me something interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Yellow Temperance.
So it's so funny. So I put this on here, and it's funny because this came after Civil War. Like, my whole thing was like, oh, Yellow Temperance could turn into or shapeshift into Geto and emotionally manipulate Gojo some way. But like, we already had literally Civil War come in and have the exact same discussion at a much better like ability. So like, I don't even really know.
I'll keep it in short here. It's basically game over. This thing is, because it requires to be big brain, Limitless, domain expansion, hollow purple. No, Yellow Temperance isn't getting through him. It's for anybody wondering what the ability is too, Yellow Temperance, when it comes in contact with your skin, just starts like eating you or like dissolving you. It's basically like stomach acid, but like in a more like solid-ish state. But like, it quite literally in its basic nature can't affect Gojo. This is just a wash.
Yellow Temperance also, I'm pretty sure you can use the organic material to like shapeshift the user and change itself. I was thinking like, oh, he turns into, you know, his best friend, and Gojo's like, oh my god, and then like he turns off his Limitless, even though he would never do that, and then just gets shanked in the stomach or something. The one time he left his guard down. No, this was immediately dethroned and literally held no importance the moment Civil War made its way to the list. We're just gonna forget that was even a thing here. We're gonna move on. Every video gets one, you know.
Yes. Can we?
Okay. There we go. You got Marilyn Manson like you wanted.
Yes. So this is an interesting one. So this one is not a combat-based stand. This is gambling. Now, I love these in terms of cross versus matchups, because it's not like just because you can destroy a building doesn't mean, you know, you're winning this. So how Marilyn Manson works is you're basically gambling, and like Marilyn Manson is just basically the house, but the house gets everything. So like, Marilyn Manson user would fight Gojo, and it would basically just be them gambling, like not like in terms of chips and coins, but like real life items and materials. Eventually, if the fight escalates to a point, it'd be like Gojo basically giving up like his heart or something for equal value. So there would be like a challenge or something set forth by Marilyn Manson, and then Gojo would have to end up doing it. So it then would just rely on like Gojo's skill. and like them continuously betting. At least in terms of the anime, when the girls fight Marilyn Manson, by sundown, how many catches can you do? And they kept on escalating and escalating and escalating it until they started reaching like absurd numbers. And like, to play the game, you have to give out something of equal value. So it would just basically be just one giant like poker match, but like it's more complex. It's all betting. So I think at one point it would end up just becoming like, I don't know, just name a challenge, and if Gojo can compete with it. I would actually end up saying here, for the most part, Gojo would probably end up like being completely fine for the most part, because he's just good at everything. So even if there was a bet, unless the bet was hyper specific and Gojo was dumb for accepting it and like let it kept on going again and again and again and again, he would end up losing. But for the most part, if it was just a like play with a beanbag ball until the end of sundown, Gojo would be literally fine for the most part.
Yeah, unfortunately, Gojo does literally have that accolade of just being good at everything, no matter what it is. Even if he doesn't know what it is, if it's a video game, he's first time picking him up, he's gonna be the best in the room. If it's like in the JoJo's canon, if they were throwing a ball back and forth, how many times they could do it, whatever the deal was, you know, Gojo would do it. I guess the only argument that I would see people make would be like, oh, well, Gojo has Limitless. Even if Gojo was to lose a bet in the very weird scenario that he does, oh, Marilyn Manson would not be able to take any of his organs from him or anything, which is completely just based off the fact that Marilyn Manson is basically like intangible. You can't do any damage to it. You can't hit it. It's literally not even a part of the physical realm for what it seems like. I'm imagining that it's not going to trigger Gojo's Limitless.
It could potentially win if the circumstances are really rigged against Gojo, but like it's Gojo, so I doubt a lot of things would like overcome him.
The one thing I could see going wrong potentially is it really is like a complex bet, or a bet where the odds are stacked against him. The tough part is like, while the user for Marilyn Manson or whoever's making the bet at the time is able to cheat as much as they want, like if Gojo cheats once, he gets fucked, which I don't think Gojo's not above cheating. Not that he's already good, he probably would be doing well, but I could see a situation where Gojo thinks he can cheat and it ends up backfiring on him. If Gojo loses, you know, a spleen or loses whatever, like he loses some random organ, he can keep going ultimately at the end of the day. But if Marilyn Manson is like, well, you know what, for this cost, I think your eyes are worth it. Again, that is Gojo cannot use Limitless without the 6 eyes.
You know what? You know what's crazy? How much was his value when he was being hunted down as a child? Was it $6 million?
Ooh, I'm not entirely sure. That's actually a really good point. I'd have to look it up.
Like Gojo can do some big brain shit and be like, nothing you bet right now is worth my life. Oh my god, I'm big braining this right now. I don't think Marilyn would be able to fucking bet against him. I don't think she has a starting price that would affect Gojo. Holy shit, wait a minute. Unless Marilyn Manson has like, oh, just a whole bunch of money to begin with, I don't think like she'd be able just to win. Gojo can just literally outhouse her.
If they're not able to make a proper bet, because it's up to Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson isn't, it doesn't cooperate with its user. It's completely self-dependent. It judges what something's value is on its own. So I guess now, also at the same time, you could say that it wouldn't view Gojo the same as other people would, but I think you got a pretty good argument that it would.
Even then, if we're just going off the stand user verse, like if we're going so long into this fucking fight, Marilyn Manson's just basically the house, so it'd be more or less its user versus Gojo, and just in terms of their skills, it would just end up being in Gojo's favor to begin with. It's actually kind of hard stacked, but like give Marilyn Manson to like anybody in JJK, then it gets interesting. I think Gojo got it for the most part.
And to be very clear, even if Gojo in the middle of the gambling and he was like, you know what, fuck this, if Gojo has any thoughts or intentions of killing the user or hurting them in any way, then Marilyn Manson considers that cheating and will immediately end the game and take whatever is owed. I don't think the value would even matter at that point. If the game starts, Gojo can't like just go, okay, domain expansion, I'm going to turn you into a vegetable, and just ignore all of this. Like as soon as Gojo goes to make the domain, Marilyn Manson will immediately consider that cheating and stop that. Definitely goes to Gojo, depending on, unless some crazy complex bet shows up.
Yeah. Let me see. Where we begin? Come on, give me something. Echoes. Oh, we're doing Jailhouse Lock?
Jailhouse Lock.
I'm gonna be honest, bro. Even when I was reading this, I still don't know what the fuck she does.
Jailhouse Lock is honestly like one of my favorite stands when it comes to like just overall powers and just concepts that Araki tries to throw in. It's like just so super duper interesting. It's not really like a one-on-one fight stand per se if Gojo is in prison and tries to escape the prison, which I guess if we're putting these two characters up against each other, that's the way that it would have to be. The user Mew Mew basically is able to debilitate the user's mind and brain functions to where they're not able to basically perform any complex tasks or remember more than 3 things. As soon as they remember the 4th thing, they will immediately forget the 1st thing. Then the stand itself is also intangible. It can basically go through the walls of the jail, go through the bars of the jail, everything like that to avoid attack. The toughest part would be, so if Gojo kills the stand first before the ability takes place, completely possible. He would just have to destroy the entire prison most likely, or just cast his domain off rip. But if Jailhouse Lock catches him off guard, I don't know if Gojo would be able to come out of this, because he basically would be put in a position where he wakes up, he's a prisoner in jail, and he goes, oh my god, where was I have to get out of this. Where was I? Oh my god, I have to get out of this. 3 things. As soon as he thinks of the 4th thing, he's already forgotten the 1st thing, which is where am I. He's gonna immediately be like, oh, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
I don't think Gojo could do any of his curse techniques. They're far too complex,
and he has too many of them.
This is probably going to be the most shocking like win for a stand. Gojo does too much simultaneously at any time for him to be effective against this. He either gets caught in a loop and or he just can't use any of his abilities properly.
It's funny you say that, because actually now that I'm really thinking about it, this might be like one of the worst possible stands for Gojo to go up against, just based off of the 6 eyes alone, because Gojo's constantly getting fed information, whether he likes it or not. He's constantly learning things about his environment, surroundings, and everything. And the fact that even we see it in the Jojo canon when Mew Mew is using it against Jolene, if Jolene is looking at 3 prison guards, she literally, the 3rd one just completely disappears because her brain can't even comprehend the 4th object. It's the prison and then the 2 guards. The 3rd one literally just disappears. So literally Gojo's going to be in a constant state of forgetting, and he's not even going to be able to exist.
His greatest boon became his greatest genetic defect. Is wild.
And the worst part is like the user can just like fuck with him too. Like literally in the story, Mew Mew is like, oh hey, look at this cockroach. Oh hey, look at this fork. Oh, you already forgot? Crazy. Oh, okay, bye.
Crazy, man. Am I gaslighting you? I don't know.
Obviously, the conditions of getting Gojo into it are very specific. Like, he would have to be in the jail. He would have to get caught by Jailhouse Lock without immediately just turning on it and fucking it up. Because any damage done to Jailhouse Lock is dealt back to Mew Mew. So if he does see, oh, that wall looks weird, hollow purple, and destroys the wall, you know, they're cooked. But if he gets caught in it, I don't think there's legitimately any way for him to get out of this.
Yuji, help! I did not know Jailhouse Lock had fans, bro. That's wild.
Hey, listen, if it's only got 1 fan, that's me. If it's got no fans, I'm dead.
That's awesome. Okay,
let's see.
Let's move back to the list. What we got? We're gonna weather report.
Weather report, heavy weather.
So, okay, this is where I can start yapping. Weather report has the ability to control a plethora of weather phenomenon, but even just looking at the intro for Jujutsu Kaisen, weather-based like powers or just the weather in general wouldn't affect Gojo. Literally nothing. None of weather report's powers would be able to do anything unless we're using Emporios, which then becomes a little bit different. But I'm gonna count that as heavy weather and not regular weather report. I don't think he'd do anything, because it'd be like a lightning bolt doesn't affect him, a rainstorm doesn't affect him, a firestorm doesn't affect him.
I don't know about a lightning bolt. A lightning bolt might technically get, well, I guess if it's I guess it would be perceived as a hostile.
This isn't like a wild ability that's going to really hurt Gojo. Other characters in different series, definitely. I think Weather Report would be able to affect most of the cast here in JJK, but like in specific with Gojo, no. However, Heavy Weather gets different because it gains 2 abilities that kind of will be very detrimental to Gojo. So the first one is Snail Ray or Rainbow Ray. How this ability works is Heavy Weather weather becomes rainbows, and in the rainbows are subliminal messages to think and or physically make a person turn into a snail. I will say this, it is even contentious in the JoJo community whether or not you actually become a snail because of the phenomenon that Weather Report's able to do, or you just act like a snail. It's very weird. And then the second one being is heavy weather has the ability to basically just make the air around you 100% oxygen, and if we all know correctly, if you were in science class, 100% oxygen literally kills you. This is where it gets interesting, because if Gojo were to look at a rainbow or one of heavy weather's rainbows, or he would end up becoming a snail because of course the light will pass Limitless. So it's like basically what we're dealing with is just like a domain expansion that isn't a domain expansion. Now with the killer oxygen, that one also can be debated. You know, Gojo needs to breathe, and if there's only 100% oxygen around, it's going to be extremely difficult.
I think the last conversation that we had actually really segues into this conversation, because if we're looking at Six Eyes, we're looking at Gojo getting all of this information, this hypersensitive information about the surrounding area. I guess you could even make the argument that like whether he's looking at the rainbow, the sun rays or not, it would immediately affect him because he's got the 360-degree long-range vision against his own will. Even as a child, Gojo's able to perceive hostile intent and perceive two curse users that are looking at him from a skyscraper above when he's just walking in the hustle and bustle of the city below and has no reason to even know that they're like looking at him. I don't think he would even be able to avoid heavy weather's sun rays or rainbows, even if he wanted to, if he's in, unless he literally closes his eyes and fights with his eyes closed. Yeah,
which he kind of does.
Which he kind of does. And again, I would even say I would throw that in there, that if his eyes are closed, are his six eyes truly off? Because if my man's using a blindfold, something tells me that if he could just walk around with his eyes closed, you know, like Brock from Pokemon, he probably would. But I don't know. That's clearly unclear. We haven't got that. I don't think we'll ever get that confirmed by Gege Akutami. But yeah, I think I agree with you where Weather Report is kind of wishy-washy, where again, I don't know. I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me whether a lightning bolt is a viable option through Limitless or not. Regardless, heavy weather is a concrete victory. And you could even say that if Gojo starts quote-unquote acting like a snail, or even just becomes a snail in general, like I doubt he would have Limitless active, so you could just stop on him. I also have to
clarify here too, heavy weather has probably the longest range out of every stand. He has like, I think it's blatantly confirmed he has like city level range just everywhere. Depending on how you see it, if heavy weather changes like an entire city's oxygen count to like basically killer, I don't know what Gojo's gonna do, dog, unless you just blow up the city. Which I don't think he would and or can, but I'd also end up saying that it affects you almost instantaneously. In the manga, Pucci is like one of the strongest characters in the verse, and he's heavily affected by heavy weather's like 100% oxygen. Gojo could probably be standing for a few seconds and boom, drops to the floor just because how much like poison is now in his body because of the oxygen in the air.
Yeah, and like for people that are gonna be like, oh, Gojo can just teleport out of the city-wide range, like he can, sure, but what is he gonna do after that? He still needs to win the fight. He's got to go back at some point. He can't just dip. If he runs away, that's still a loss.
There's a whole bunch of snails around too.
I think Gojo's not going to be able to stand against weather itself or just becoming a snail. I think that's pretty
man's cooked. All right, let's move on. Let's go. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we got.
Oh, you can finally go on your Rohan rant.
This one is so fucking needlessly complex. So on the surface level, in terms of this fight, it's not impressive. Heaven's Door gets ridiculously overpowered really quick. In terms of speed alone, apparently Rohan can keep up with Maiden Heaven's ability to like infinitely speed up time. I know a lot of people take it as a joke or just a reference. Later on in Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe and a lot of other side stories, the stand is able to keep up with literal deities just in general to begin with. Actually insane, because then you have to bring in like real life religions and just like start scaling off of them. So like on top of the fact its ability to kind of alter memories gets really funky in the side stories, because it's stated in like the manga itself that Rohan isn't able to infect himself. However, in the Rohan Goes to the Louvre, Rohan could potentially do a lot here. He could, not memeing, potentially just write in himself is not affected by Gojo Satoru, and then like now it's just like, oh well, now he's just gonna get turned into a book, and now, like, I don't know. Yeah, Rohan's busted here depending on the interpretation you use. If it's part 4, no. But if you go with like the wild ass scaling and start like really taking everything at face value and like the extended stories and stuff, Rohan probably wins because of just bullshit, just stupid hack. Just I win basically. So here's the problem too. Technically, what I was explaining is kind of like how Araki depicts the ability now, but at least in early part 4, how the ability worked. If you saw Rohan's his scripts of his early manga panels, like the ability will proc and Rohan can just affect your body. If that's still in effect here, or still like a way to open up a person other than just getting really close to them, Gojo would literally see the manuscript and then just heal over, and now he's just open. His hack is just so easily accessible for him to just affect a person. And if you just bring in like the side story stuff, it's just like, oh, Rohan just wins because he just writes in Gojo's face, I win, fall asleep forever or something.
Do you think that would the Limitless would still be in effect while he's in book form? Like Rohan would be able to turn him into a book, but he wouldn't be able to like go up and write in him?
It depends.
Even if he couldn't write in the book, could he just leave Gojo as a book?
I think eventually it wears off. It definitely wears off with some characters. They just wake up. So it does kind of have a time limit.
So if he turns Gojo into the book but can't write in him,
it's just kind of it would end up just being a stalemate then.
So from what you described, Rohan would be able to defend himself from like things like red, blue, and hollow purple?
Probably, I would say, for the most part. Since Rohan was able to take away like from his memory looking at an infinite void permanently, depending on how you write it down, Rohan could just say he's unaffected by Gojo's mental energy, his curse techniques. Potentially it would work. Would he be able to get it off in time? That's when we get debatable, but Rohan does definitely have a lot of answers to Gojo basically.
All right, the legendary Rohan Kishibe rant has been completed.
Yes,
you can die happily now.
Rohan. Okay, let's see what we get. Ooh. Oh,
Love Train time.
Okay, so in the last video we talked about this, but we didn't use Love Train, so I won't go over D4C. I'll just talk about Love Train. So what Love Train is, it is a light barrier for Funny Valentine and D4C to basically hang out in. This light barrier basically is able to tank misfortune, so that's basically any ill will and or intent against Funny Valentine and D4C while in their light wall, and redirect it at any point in space and time, including the multiverse. The only way to get through it is to have an infinite amount of energy perfectly in a singular spot, basically rip right through it. So basically you need Tusk Act 4. Put that ability on top of D4C, which has the ability of basically giving Funny Valentine infinite lives and has the ability to cross dimensions regularly. I personally don't see literally anything else but maybe the domain expansion affecting him. Literally none of Gojo's kit could affect Love Train like at all.
Domain expansion, it creates Gojo's pocket dimension. So I guess it just depends on how you would consider how those two pocket dimensions would interact. Would one overtake the other? Like if Gojo can expand Unlimited Void larger than what Love Train is able to manifest, and take up more space, and then completely capture Love Train and Valentine inside, and then Unlimited Void attack everything within.
I don't think Limited Void would work. I just don't think it would. I think it just genuinely hard counters it. The fact that it just took an infinite amount of energy just to pierce through the wall, or at least at bare minimum a near infinite amount of energy just to harm him.
It deflects misfortune, not just attacks. Yes. And you know, you would consider, I guess becoming a vegetable might be misfortune. So
what would happen in that scenario is if Love Train is still active, even with like in a domain expansion or whatever, the infinite amount of information or the constant repeating of information would not go to Valentine. It would hit technically possibly Gojo or somebody else in the multiverse. But I would also say that Valentine only has one win con, and I do have to preface this. He can only attack outside the light barrier. So if Gojo were to catch him off guard, yes, Gojo could kill him, but this is a very defensive fight. It's super defensive and would probably take a while. This would not be a short battle like whatsoever. Gojo just doesn't have a lot of answers for Valentine, so I'm leaning towards Valentine here, not out of bias. And there's the whole infinite lives thing, and then like bringing in like another Gojo, or I don't know, Sukuna Gojo or Geto Gojo, and they end up fighting or something, which is entirely possible because we have seen Funny Valentine literally cross an infinite number of universes to find the perfect somebody to fight Johnny, for example. So it's not out of the realms of possibility if he feels like he can't do it. I think Valentine just has way too many answers for Gojo, and Gojo just has none to very little.
Yeah, the big thing is even if Love Train can't win, there's nothing that Gojo can do to get the win on his end either. It basically just becomes a stalemate.
Okay, let's hit the wheel. Let's see what we got.
We've got Underworld. So this is we were talking about a little bit before.
Yeah. So to explain Underworld has the ability to replay historical events in 100% accuracy underground. And eventually anybody who walks into that area, or you can say domain here if you want to, they will just replay events of what that ground has experienced. For example, Jolene and crew were on an airplane that blew up. So this is very dependent on where they fight. If Underworld is somehow in an area, and this is a very large area too.
Pretty sure it's all of Orlando that the effect is.
That's a big ass city, by the way.
Yeah.
What would end up happening here is Gojo, if he didn't leave the memory or was able to escape what's happening in that historical event that is currently happening, even with all of his abilities, he can't change the fate and or history of that incident. So if he wasn't like in a big one where it's all like, because they're probably going to be in Japan, not trying to be a dick when I'm saying this, Nagasaki for some reason, well, you're cooked, Gojo. That's a nuclear bomb. You can't change the fate of it unless somehow you miraculously can all of a sudden. So this one's very like location dependent. If he was the one getting stabbed or looked at somebody getting stabbed, like he was just a third party or something, he'd most likely be unaffected and he would be able to beat Underworld and his user.
It really depends on the overall event of the memory that's being played out. Like if we were to host the fight in the exact same place, or what, they're in Orlando, and then there's the plane that crashes, there's the argument to be made, like Metas was saying, that if the event is the plane crash, every single person in that plane died, technically speaking, regardless of the fact that Gojo has Limitless and should be able to be invulnerable to the plane's explosion, just based on the history, you can't change the fact that everyone on the plane died. Now, again, you could argue, sure, Limitless, that just defies reality, it defies the memory entirely, but that's why, again, location matters, because if we're in an event like Nagasaki or Hiroshima with a nuclear explosion going off, the atom bomb, that is most certainly going to go through Limitless without a doubt. And even if you want to say the force doesn't go through, the radiation goes through. Exactly.
I think it is just matchup dependent for the most part, but like reverse curse technique and stuff could play a factor too. This one's just interesting. It's just how Gojo's powers and stuff would just affect in general.
There are also loopholes in the memory, like for example, like specifically I believe Jolene and Hermes are able to get out of it because two of the people on the airplane crash survived because they were in a specific air pocket of the plane. They were able to basically toss those people out and get in those exact seats so that they could basically be the people that survive. And you know what, you could say that's fucked up, but the good news is that anyone that doesn't die in the original event, no matter what happens, still won't die. You're not forsaking that person's life. Not that Gojo would understand the exact event that's going on. The Six Eyes may at least help him in that and going, okay, well, if I'm in an airplane crash, I'm able to tell that this is the safest place in the airplane. Is that going to guarantee him surviving? Probably not, because again, he doesn't have the foresight of these two people survived, but it's still, he's gonna be, you know, more capable of adapting to the situation than most people. But as we talked about before, it's definitely debatable whether things like the Limitless would actually save him, because if he is supposed to die in the event.
Underworld potentially can kill, but I doubt it.
And the stand is active while the memory is going on, because I'm pretty sure Jolene and Hermes are like trying to fight it in the middle of the memory. So it's also potentially possible Gojo could, you know, attack Underworld if he gets close to the memory, or God forbid, you could even make the argument domain expansion, funneling all this information into you can't even maintain your ability and the memory just cancels out. So Gojo does also have win conditions. Hopefully Versus wouldn't be that stupid.
It probably is though.
Yeah, he does it in the canon. So you could also make the argument that because Gojo has just a genuine ability to teleport, I'm not sure if he's trapped in the memory and can't escape, but I mean, I'm sure someone could make the argument he could just poof. All right, I'm somewhere else now.
I'm shocked we haven't got Wonder Review or Gold Experience Requiem yet. Or the hand. We haven't got the hand? Are you serious?
Yeah, no, there's so many that like we've stayed away from for some reason. The wheel doesn't want it to happen yet. It's saving the best for last.
I won't lie. A lot of the, I'm seeing the list. A lot of these ones are actually just fun discussions.
This is going to be the best part.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Spin the wheel. Let me
spin
see.
the wheel.